Joining me now is Natalie Sanandaji, who is a survivor of the Nova Music Festival massacre on the 7th of October. You're a 28-year-old resident, a native of Long Island, New York, in the United States. Tell me how you came to be at the festival, but more importantly, how did you survive?
So I was at the festival. I got to Israel for a friend's wedding, and as the daughter of an Israeli mom, I have been going to Israel almost every year my entire life. And one of the main questions, after surviving the festival is, of course, how did you survive? And at first I struggled answering that question because the answer is nobody knew what direction to run in. Nobody knew what direction was the direction of safety. Nobody knew what decision was going to get you killed or save your life while running from the Hamas terrorists. And a few months into the war, I met a man who came up to me at a vigil that I was speaking at, and he said that he had seen a lot of my interviews, and he said that he had interviewed many Holocaust survivors in his life. And when Holocaust survivors were asked in life and death situations how they knew what decision to make to save their life, they coined a term called a choiceless choice. And the meaning of a choiceless choice is that in those life and death situations, you don't even have a moment to try to understand what decision is the right decision, but you simply have to make a decision in that moment. And that perfectly describes every decision we made while running from the Hamas terrorists. An example of one of those choiceless choices was about 2 hours into running. We passed by a group of friends of ours that were hiding in a ditch, and they saw us and they waved at us and they told us to come over and hide in the ditch with them. And we started crawling into this ditch until one of my friends said, "This is a bad idea. If we hide in this ditch and the Hamas terrorists find us, we're going to be sitting ducks. They're going to shoot us right on the spot." And he said our only option for survival is to continue running. And that's what we did. We continued running the whole time. We never stood still. And unfortunately for our friends who stayed back and hid in that ditch, they did not make it out.
I literally just cannot imagine. Tell me, did you witness any particular acts of heroism on that day?
So after about 4 hours of running, we hadn't heard gunshots in a few minutes, and we saw a small tree, and we decided to sit under this tree to get some shade. And suddenly we saw a white pickup truck driving towards us. And our automatic reaction was that this is a terrorist coming to kill us. And eventually when the pickup truck got closer, we realized that it was someone coming to save us. And it was a man named Moshe Sati from the town of Patish. And he came, we all jumped in his pickup truck. He drove us to his hometown. And right after he dropped us off, he went back to save more lives. And I never got his name. And it took a few months to track him down. And eventually when I met him, I found out that him and his son drove back and forth from Patish to the festival grounds for about 8 or 10 hours that day. And they saved about 300 to 400 lives.
I understand that this traumatic experience of that day has led you to transform your own life now. Tell us about what you do today.
So since October 7th, I started working for the Combat Anti-Semitism movement. And through the Combat Anti-Semitism movement, number one, I've still been doing my speaking engagements and speaking out and sharing my story as much as possible. But it's also been very fulfilling to start working for an organization that on a daily basis is fighting anti-Semitism. And one of the examples of the way they try to fight anti-Semitism is pushing to get the IRA definition of anti-Semitism adopted everywhere that we could possibly get it adopted. This definition protects the Jewish people much more than the current definition does. And that's just one of the examples of what they're constantly doing to fight anti-Semitism around the world.
Have you been confronted by deniers of the 7th of October? And how are you able to contend with that?
I have, whether it's in person or online, and a lot of the time they come at me in a very aggressive tone and manner and way of speaking, and my answer to that is to try to stay as calm as possible, because eventually if you're responding to someone in a very calm manner when they're coming at you in a very aggressive way, they start to feel ridiculous. And sometimes, in some cases, I've had instances where people start to hear me out, and I send them articles, and I can see their point of view shifting a little bit on how they view the conflict, and how they view what happened on October 7th. And in some cases, they don't want to hear you out, and I start to realize that it's not worth my time to even speak to this person, and I eventually just stop answering. But staying calm and kind of just making my points is the best way I speak to those people.
What does it mean for you to be here today at the March of the Living?
Coming to the March of the Living is something that I've always wanted to do and I hadn't had the chance to do until now. And to come here as a survivor of a pogrom, which is something I never thought I would say, you know, it just shows once again how strong we are and how we will get through this, the way the Holocaust survivors got through what they went through, and to come here and to remember, because for me the most important thing about October 7th is making sure people remember and sharing my story over and over again so that people remember. And just as it is important to remember October 7th, it's even more important to remember the Holocaust, because as time goes on, people forget more and more.
Natalie, thank you very much. I'm so pleased you're here with us today. Thank you very much. Good luck.